The moment the athlete's hand ripped through Maya's blouse, the entire gymnasium fell silent. They thought they'd finally broken the quiet art girl. They didn't know they'd just unleashed the warrior who would bring their entire kingdom down. The afternoon light, filtered through the massive, three-story glass walls of the Northwood Preparatory Academy's Learning Commons, was the perfect shade of diffused white. It was the kind of light that made colors on a screen pop with perfect fidelity, and for Maya Desai, it was everything. She sat cross-legged on a low, modern couch, her expression one of intense focus. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes scanned the complex architecture of the virtual museum she was designing on her Wacom tablet. An intricate braid of thick, black hair cascaded over one shoulder, a single, deliberate work of art in itself. At Northwood, a place where wealth and lineage were as much a part of the curriculum as calculus, Maya had carved out a quiet existence. She wasn't shy in the way a mouse is shy, she was introverted and focused, her silence a byproduct of a mind that was constantly building, creating, and living in worlds of its own design. Her talent in digital media and interactive art was undeniable, a quiet hum of genius that the faculty recognized, even if the student body mostly saw a pretty, quiet girl who kept to herself. She was gently guiding her classmate, Sarah, through the user interface of her project when a shadow fell over them. The air, once humming with the low murmur of studious conversation, suddenly grew still and heavy. Ethan Vance had arrived. As captain of Northwood's championship-winning lacrosse team, Ethan didn't walk, he presided. At 6'2", with meticulously coiffed dark brown hair and predatory gray eyes, he was the living embodiment of the privilege that permeated the academy. His father, a titan of corporate law, sat on the school's board, a fact that afforded Ethan a kind of diplomatic immunity. He was flanked by his usual sycophants, Liam and Noah, two hulking lacrosse players whose social standing was directly tethered to Ethan's magnetic field. Well, Ethan's voice boomed, slicing through the quiet. It was a voice accustomed to echoing across fields, not respecting the sanctity of a study space. If it isn't our resident digital ghost, Maya Desai. Maya didn't look up immediately. She finished her sentence to Sarah, a small act of defiance. So the haptic feedback should sync with the audio cues. Only then did she lift her gaze, her expression placid, her heart rate a steady, controlled rhythm. "Can I help you, Ethan?" He smirked, a flash of white teeth that was more of a warning than a pleasantry. He gestured dismissively at her tablet. "Still playing with your little cartoons? Cute." He leaned in, placing his hands on the back of her couch, invading her space. "I'm here to offer you a major upgrade. Prom is in 3 weeks." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air, expecting her to blush or stammer. Dozens of other girls would have. "I've decided," he continued, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone that was meant to be charming but felt like a threat, "that you're going with me." It wasn't a question. It was a coronation. Maya had seen this performance before. Ethan collected prom dates like trophies, parading them for a night before their social currency mysteriously plummeted in the weeks following. She carefully set her stylus down. The entire Learning Commons was now a silent theater, with dozens of students pretending to read while their eyes were glued to the drama. "That's a very direct offer, Ethan," Maya said, her voice soft but steady. "But I'm going to be busy that night. I have a project deadline for my portfolio." Ethan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A glitch in the matrix of his perfect world. Behind him, Liam and Noah exchanged a look of disbelief. The word "no" was not in their leader's vocabulary. "I don't think you understood me," Ethan said, his tone hardening. He straightened up, towering over her. "This isn't an offer you decline. Do you know how many girls in this school would kill for this? I'm making you the queen of the night." "And I appreciate the sentiment," Maya replied, beginning to pack her things with deliberate calm. "I'm sure one of them will make a wonderful queen. If you'll excuse me." She stood to leave, but Liam shifted, casually blocking her path. "Big mistake," Ethan said, his voice now a low growl. The facade of the charming prince was gone, replaced by the petulant king. Nobody says no to me. There's a first time for everything, Maya said, trying to step around him. Suddenly, Chloe Kim, captain of the debate team and Maya's best friend, materialized at her side. Chloe was sharp, fierce, and armed with a tongue that could dissect an argument, or a person, in seconds. "Is there a problem with your hearing, Vance?" She said. "She's busy." Ethan's eyes narrowed, but his politician's smile slid back into place. "No problem at all, Kim. Just a friendly chat." He turned his gaze back to Maya, and the coldness in his gray eyes made a chill run down her spine. He leaned in so only she could hear. "This isn't over," he whispered, the words like ice chips. "You will regret this. I promise." With that, he turned and strode away, his two lieutenants trailing in his wake like tugboats behind a battleship. The tension in the room broke, and the low hum of conversation resumed, now filled with whispers about what had just transpired. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked, her hand on Maya's arm. Maya nodded, though her mind was already calculating the fallout. "I'm fine. He's just a bully with an ego." "He's a predator, Maya," Chloe corrected her grimly. "And you just wounded his pride. Be careful." Maya gave a small, reassuring smile. "I'm always careful." But as she walked away, the echo of his promise, "You will regret this," clung to her like a shroud. She had just challenged the most powerful boy in a school built on power. The storm was coming. The retribution was swifter and more insidious than Maya could have imagined. It didn't come in the form of a locker slam or a whispered insult in the hallway. Ethan was more sophisticated than that. His revenge was a 21st century witch hunt, designed for maximum humiliation and plausible deniability. The next morning, Maya found Chloe by their usual spot, a sunlit alcove near the chemistry labs. Chloe's face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. "He didn't wait," she said, her voice tight with fury. She showed Maya the screen. It was a post in a private, invite-only social media group called Northwood Elite Whispers, the school's toxic digital nerve center. The post featured a flattering, candid photo of Maya laughing, likely taken without her knowledge. But it was the audio file attached that made her blood run cold. "I can't believe he even tried," a voice said, a voice that was almost hers, but twisted, higher-pitched, and dripping with disdain. "Like, I would ever go to prom with some dumb jock whose only future is selling insurance for his dad. I only date people with actual brains. He's completely beneath me." It was a chillingly effective fabrication. Liam, whose cousin was a sound engineering student, had worked with one of Ethan's tech-savvy cronies. They had taken snippets of Maya's voice from a class presentation posted online, feeding them into an AI program that stitched them together into a believable, slanderous monologue. It was her voice, weaponized against her. The caption beneath was simple and devastating: "Heard our queen Maya Desai turn down Ethan Vance. Now we know why. Hashtag elitist, hashtag too good for us, hashtag get over yourself." This is a deep fake," Maya whispered, her stomach churning. "It's not real." "Of course it's not," Chloe snapped, already typing furiously. "It's slander. Defamation. We're reporting this to Principal Thompson right now." But they both knew how this would play out. By the time they navigated the school's bureaucracy, the damage would be done. In the court of Northwood public opinion, the verdict was already in. The day was a living nightmare. The whispers weren't just whispers anymore, they were open stares. As she walked to her AP physics class, she saw a group of girls playing the audio clip, giggling as they looked at her. Her lab partner, a boy who had always been friendly, mumbled an excuse and asked the teacher to switch tables. The teacher, Mr. Davies, a man who usually championed his students, avoided her gaze and quietly approved the request. He knew the Vance family funded the new science wing. In the cafeteria, the isolation was absolute. As she carried her tray, looking for a place to sit, she could hear the fake audio playing from multiple phones, a distorted echo of her own voice haunting her. Every table she approached suddenly fell silent, the occupants staring down at their food or pulling out their phones. Humiliation burned in her cheeks, hot and acidic. She eventually found an empty table in a far corner, eating her lunch alone under the weight of 100 accusing eyes. She received a text from her project group for interactive design. "Hey Maya, we think it's better if we just split the work up for now. We'll handle the presentation." It was a polite, cowardly dismissal. She had been digitally excommunicated. Chloe was a righteous fury, a one-woman defense team. She confronted a group of Liam's lacrosse friends, her voice ringing with the clarity of a debate champion. "You know that audio is fake, right? You're participating in a coordinated harassment campaign. Do you have any idea the legal ramifications of spreading defamatory, AI-generated content?" They just laughed. "Chill out, Kim. It's just a joke." When Chloe and Maya finally got a meeting with Principal Thompson, he listened with a pained, weary expression. He glanced at the impressive, framed photograph of himself shaking hands with Mr. Vance at a fundraiser. "This is very disturbing, girls," he said, steepling his fingers. "But without concrete proof of who created this audio file, my hands are tied. It's one student's word against another's. I'll look into it." It was the classic administrative stonewall, a gentle closing of a door in their faces. The message was clear: the Vances were too powerful, the situation too messy. Maya was on her own. That afternoon, she hid in the library, trying to lose herself in the familiar comfort of her work, but the focus wouldn't come. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A single, chilling message: "This is just the beginning. It gets so much worse." She knew who it was from. The digital ghosts he had created were just the first wave. The real monster was yet to come. She looked around the library, at the faces of her peers, and realized she was utterly, completely alone, adrift in a sea of hostility that Ethan Vance had created with a few clicks and a lie. Maya found her refuge, or what was left of it. The rooftop greenhouse had been abandoned years ago after budget cuts, a glass skeleton at the top of the oldest wing of the school. It was her secret place, where the scent of dry soil and decaying leaves mixed with the urban air, a place of quiet decay that she found strangely beautiful. She would come here to sketch, to think, to escape the suffocating social pressures of Northwood. Today, the escape was an illusion. She pushed open the squealing metal door and froze. He was there, waiting for her, sitting on an overturned terracotta pot. Ethan Vance looked up from his phone, a smirk of cold satisfaction on his face. In his other hand, he held her Wacom tablet. Her heart didn't drop, it turned to a solid, cold stone in her chest. "I figured you'd come here," he said, his voice casual, as if they were discussing the weather. "You're predictable, Desai. It's what makes this so easy." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet were rooted to the cracked linoleum floor. The sight of her tablet, her entire artistic life, her future, in his hands paralyzed her. "What do you want, Ethan?" He stood up, walking toward her with a predator's unhurried grace. "I want you to understand the consequences of disrespect. The audio file? That was just a little public relations campaign to correct your image. This," he held up her tablet. "This is about your future." Her breath hitched. "How did you get that?" "My friends are resourceful. Your locker isn't exactly Fort Knox." He powered on the device, and the screen lit up with her current project, the virtual museum. It was 3 years of her life on that device. College applications, recommendation letter drafts, and her entire portfolio, the key to getting into a top art school like RSD or CalArts. "My uncle, David Vance," Ethan said conversationally, his eyes boring into hers, "he sits on the admissions board at the Rhode Island School of Design. Funny, isn't it? He golfs with my dad. One word from him about a student with a Character issue, and their application goes straight into the shredder. The threat was no longer vague. It was specific, surgical, and utterly devastating. "This is insane," Maya whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. "All because I wouldn't go to prom with you." "It was never about prom," he snapped, his composure finally cracking. "It's about order. It's about respect. You publicly humiliated me. You challenged the way things work here." He navigated to the folder containing her portfolio, the one meticulously curated for her college applications. His thumb hovered over a subfolder labeled Self-Portraits. "This is a beautiful piece," he said, tapping on a stunning, photorealistic digital painting. "It would be a shame if..." His thumb swiped left. A confirmation box appeared. "Permanently delete this file." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. It was a form of torture so exquisitely cruel, she could barely breathe. He wasn't just threatening to destroy her work, he was making her watch. "Stop," she pleaded, the word barely a whisper. "I can't hear you," he taunted. His thumb pressed down. The file vanished. "Oops." A sob escaped her lips. He moved to the next folder. Abstracts. "You can make this all stop, right now," he said, his voice dropping to a low, venomous purr. "I've arranged for the gym to be empty at 3:45. You'll come alone. You're going to get on your knees, on camera, and you're going to apologize. You'll tell everyone you were wrong, that you were arrogant, and that you are grateful I even gave you the time of day. You'll play the part, and maybe I'll let you keep what's left of your future." He was offering her a deal from hell, public humiliation in exchange for the remnants of her dreams. For a moment, she felt the crushing weight of despair. He had all the power. He had her future in his hand. She could see her parents' faces, their pride and sacrifice, all turning to ash because of this one boy's wounded ego. Then, something inside her shifted. Years of her uncle's training, the quiet discipline he'd instilled in her, echoed in her mind. "The goal of combat is to de-escalate," he used to say. "But you cannot de-escalate with a person who thrives on your submission. With a bully, the only way to end the fight is to end it decisively." The tears stopped. The trembling ceased. Her spine straightened. She looked at Ethan, at the ugly, entitled rage behind his eyes, and she saw him for what he was, a hollow boy, so terrified of his own insignificance that he had to destroy others to feel whole. She had a choice. She could kneel in the gym, or she could stand on her own 2 feet. She chose to stand. 3:45, she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. It was not a promise of submission. It was an acceptance of a challenge. Ethan smirked, misinterpreting her tone as defeat. "Wise choice. Come alone. Don't be late." He turned and left the greenhouse, leaving her tablet on a dusty potting bench. Maya walked over to it, her movements stiff. She powered it on. He'd only deleted the one file. A single, cruel cut to show her he could. It was a leash, and he expected her to follow it right to the gymnasium. She picked up the tablet, her knuckles white. He was right. She would be there at 3:45. But she wouldn't be coming to kneel. She would be coming to end it. The gymnasium at Northwood was a cathedral of modern athletics, with polished maple floors, soaring ceilings, and digital scoreboards. At 3:45 p.m., it was eerily silent, transformed into a gladiatorial arena. The usual after-school practices had been mysteriously cancelled. The heavy doors thudded shut behind Maya, the sound echoing in the vast, empty space. In the center of the court, under the harsh glare of the overhead lights, stood Ethan, Liam, and Noah. A fourth boy, Brad Stevens, a known crony of Ethan's, stood slightly off to the side, his phone raised and recording. The floor around them was a scene of desecration. Ethan hadn't left her tablet on the bench in the greenhouse. He had brought it here. It lay shattered on the floor, its screen a spiderweb of cracked glass, the case splintered. It was a public execution of her future. "Right on time," Ethan said, his voice amplified by the gym's acoustics. "I was worried you'd chicken out." Maya walked forward slowly, her senses on high alert. The emergency exits were chained, she saw the glint of metal from across the court. The main doors she'd come through were her only escape, and Liam was already subtly shifting his position to block them. "You already destroyed it," she said, her voice flat, gazing at the wreckage of her work. "Consider that a down payment," Ethan sneered, circling her like a shark. "Now, it's time for you to pay the rest of your debt." Brad's streaming this to a private group. "It's going to be my masterpiece." He gestured to the floor. "On your knees. Beg. Tell everyone how you were wrong, how you need my approval. Make it convincing." Maya's eyes swept over them. 3 larger, stronger opponents, and one recording her humiliation for a digital audience. They saw a cornered, broken girl. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The cold, hard certainty that had settled in her on the rooftop crystallized into action. "No," she said simply. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "What did you say?" "I said no," she repeated, her voice gaining a resonant strength that surprised them all. "I see 3 cowards who get their power from destroying things they could never create. I see insecure boys so fragile that a single word of rejection sends them into a spiral of rage." "Wrong answer," Noah growled, charging at her from the side, aiming to tackle her in a brute force assault. That's when Maya moved. To the watching boys, it was like she blurred. Years of Wing Chun training, of learning to use an opponent's energy against them, took over. She didn't meet Noah's force, she sidestepped it, her hand shooting out in a perfect pack saw, deflecting his arm. She used his own momentum, adding a gentle but firm palm strike to his shoulder that sent him stumbling sideways, crashing hard into the metal bleachers with a deafening clang. 1 down. Liam, enraged, came at her next, fists swinging wildly. He was all power, no technique. Maya ducked under a haymaker, her body flowing with the grace of a dancer. As his arm passed over her head, she moved in close, a textbook application of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She grabbed his extended arm, hooked her leg behind his, and used his own weight and forward motion to throw him over her hip. He landed on the floor with a grunt that knocked the wind out of him. In his desperate, flailing fall, his hand caught the front of her vintage print blouse. The delicate fabric, a representation of her artistic self, tore with a loud, ripping sound, exposing the plain gray sports bra she wore underneath. The gym fell silent again. This was the moment of ultimate humiliation they had planned. They expected her to cover herself, to cry, to break. Instead, Maya stood tall. With a deliberate, almost ceremonial motion, she shrugged off the tattered remains of her shirt, letting them fall to the floor. She stood before them, not as a victim, but as a warrior shedding a restrictive skin. "You wanted to strip me of my dignity," she said, her voice ringing with cold fury, her eyes locked on Ethan. "You wanted to break me. But all you've done is free me from pretending to be someone I'm not." Ethan's face had gone pale. This was not in the script. The power dynamic had inverted so fast it gave him vertigo. He was the one who was supposed to be in control. "Last chance, Ethan," Maya said, shifting into a perfect fighting stance, her hands raised in a classic Wing Chun guard. "Walk away. Leave me, and every other person you've ever bullied, alone. Or I end this. My way." His colossal ego couldn't process retreat. With a roar of pure, unadulterated rage, he charged, abandoning all thought of technique, a battering ram of fury. Maya waited. Calm. Centered. She let him close the distance, let his rage build to its peak. At the last possible second, she pivoted on her left foot. Her body coiled and then unleashed, her right leg snapping up in a flawless roundhouse kick. It was a thing of terrible beauty, the power generated from her hips, traveling like a shockwave through her leg, culminating in the whip crack of her foot connecting with the side of Ethan's head. The sound was sickeningly loud, like a baseball bat hitting a melon. The force of the impact lifted Ethan clean off his feet. His body spun grotesquely in midair before he crashed to the polished hardwood floor with a thunderous bang that echoed off the silent walls. Silence. Absolute and profound. Brad's phone clattered to the floor as his trembling hands gave out. Ethan Vance, King of Northwood, lay sprawled and unconscious. The judgment was complete. The silence was shattered by the gymnasium doors bursting open. Principal Thompson stood in the doorway, his face a mask of disbelief, flanked by 2 campus security guards. Behind them, her face etched with worry, was Chloe. "I called them," Chloe said, rushing to Maya's side and wrapping a towel she'd grabbed from the locker room around her shoulders. "You didn't answer my texts. I knew something was wrong." Principal Thompson's eyes took in the scene, the shattered tablet, 2 of his star athletes groaning on the floor, the school's golden boy unconscious, and Maya, standing resolute amidst the wreckage. And on the floor, still recording everything, was Brad's phone. "Someone," the principal said, his voice dangerously low, "had better start explaining. Now." Just as Brad began to stammer, a new figure stormed into the gym, his face purple with rage. It was Arthur Vance, Ethan's father, a senior partner at the city's most powerful law firm. He must have been on campus for a board meeting. "What is the meaning of this?" Mr. Vance bellowed, his eyes locking on his unconscious son. "My son is injured. That girl," he pointed a trembling finger at Maya, "she assaulted him. I'll have her arrested. I'll sue this school into the ground." He was a whirlwind of legal threats and paternal fury, a man used to bulldozing any obstacle with his wealth and influence. He was about to learn that some truths cannot be bulldozed. Maya stood her ground. "Your son stole my property," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "He destroyed 3 years of my work to blackmail me into humiliating myself on camera for his entertainment. He threatened my entire future. His friends assaulted me. I defended myself." "Lies." Mr. Vance sputtered. "Actually," Principal Thompson said, walking over and carefully picking up Brad's phone. "We have a recording." He pressed play. The video was damning. It showed Ethan's ultimatum, his sneering threats, his admission of stealing her tablet. It showed Noah's charge, Liam's attack, the ripping of her shirt. It showed everything. The color drained from Arthur Vance's face as he watched. When the video reached the part where his son detailed the blackmail plot, outlining how he would use his uncle's position at RISD to ruin Maya, Mr. Vance closed his eyes, a man defeated by undeniable, high-definition truth. At that exact moment, a new front opened in the war for justice. Chloe, seeing the incontrovertible proof, had been furiously typing on her phone. She sent a single message to a private, encrypted support group she had created for victims of bullying at Northwood. "It's over. We have proof on Ethan. It's safe now." As if on cue, Principal Thompson's phone, which he had placed on the scorer's table, began to buzz. Then it buzzed again. And again. He picked it up, his eyes widening. A flood of emails and texts was pouring in. "Principal Thompson, Ethan Vance did the same thing to me last year. I have screenshots. Rebecca L. He threatened to out my brother. I have the texts. Sarah P. He spread rumors that got my financial aid reviewed. I was too scared to say anything. Emily C." One after another, an avalanche of testimony. Years of silenced fear, unleashed in a digital torrent. The individual stories of victims, once isolated and terrified, were now converging into a single, deafening roar of collective truth. Principal Thompson looked from his phone to the pale, sweating face of Arthur Vance. "It seems, Mr. Vance," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his own institution's failure, "that your son's actions are not an isolated incident. They are a pattern. He was already dialing 911. "I need police and paramedics at the Northwood Gymnasium. We have multiple assault victims and evidence of theft, destruction of property, and extensive blackmail." Liam, clutching his ribs, finally seemed to grasp the enormity of their situation. "It was all Ethan's idea," he blurted out. "He made us do it." The foundation of Ethan's kingdom, built on fear and privilege, had crumbled to dust in less than 5 minutes. The arrival of police cars and an ambulance solidified the new reality. As paramedics attended to Ethan, who was beginning to stir, a police officer read a stunned Arthur Vance the charges being brought against his son. Maya knelt by the remains of her tablet, the symbol of her destroyed work. Tears finally fell, not of fear, but of grief for the art she had lost. Chloe put a comforting arm around her. "We'll fix this," she whispered fiercely. "You'll create something even better." Maya looked up, past the flashing lights and the defeated faces of her tormentors, and knew her friend was right. This wasn't just an ending. It was a violent, painful, but necessary beginning. The fallout was a seismic event that reshaped the entire landscape of Northwood Preparatory Academy. Ethan Vance's trial was swift. The video evidence, combined with the testimony of over a dozen other girls who came forward, was insurmountable. He was convicted and sentenced to juvenile detention, followed by years of probation and mandatory therapy. The Vance family's power, once absolute, evaporated. Faced with a massive class action lawsuit, they were forced into settlements that cost them millions. Arthur Vance resigned from every board he sat on, his reputation in tatters. But the real change grew from the ground up. The incident forced a reckoning within the school. Principal Thompson, shaken from his complacency, spearheaded the creation of the Northwood Pact, a radical new zero-tolerance policy on bullying, harassment, and consent, co-authored by a student committee led by Chloe Kim. The pact became a model, adopted by schools across the state. Maya's story went viral, but on her own terms. She declined interviews with national news outlets, instead working with Chloe to write an anonymous blog post detailing the events, focusing on the systemic issues of privilege and the power of collective action. The post, titled, "One Voice, Then Many," was shared millions of times. Colleges that had received Maya's initial application now saw her in a new light. The admissions office at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, reached out personally. Their famed media lab, a place where art, technology, and activism converged, saw her not as a victim, but as exactly the kind of resilient, innovative thinker they wanted. They offered her a full scholarship. The destruction of her portfolio had been devastating, but liberating. Freed from her past work, her new art was bolder, fiercer. She created pieces that explored themes of resilience, trauma, and the complex relationship between vulnerability and strength. Her new portfolio, created in a feverish 3-month burst of creativity, was more powerful than anything she had done before. The most profound change, however, was personal. The settlement money from the Vances was substantial. After discussing it with her family, Maya knew exactly what she had to do. 2 years later, in a refurbished warehouse in a nearby city, the Phoenix Project opened its doors. It was a non-profit organization of her own design, a unique sanctuary for young people. It offered 3 things: a state-of-the-art digital art studio for trauma-informed art therapy, a fully equipped dojo for self-defense training, and access to pro bono legal services for victims of harassment and assault. On its opening day, Maya stood at the entrance, no longer the quiet girl who hid in corners. She had integrated the 2 sides of herself, the artist and the warrior. She was calm, centered, and radiated a quiet strength that was more intimidating than Ethan's bombast had ever been. Her first visitor was a teenage girl who reminded Maya so much of her younger self, quiet, artistic, with eyes that held a familiar fear. The girl whispered that she was being bullied at school but was too afraid to tell anyone. Maya knelt to meet the girl's eyes, her voice soft but firm. "You are in the right place. Here, we will show you how to turn your pain into art," she said, gesturing to the gleaming art stations. And over there, she nodded toward the dojo, we will show you that your body is not a liability, but a source of power. You will learn to stand your ground. She smiled, a real, warm smile. But most importantly, we will show you that you are worth fighting for. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the large warehouse windows, Maya stood in the center of her creation. On the walls hung the first pieces of survivor art. In the dojo, the first self-defense class was ending, the students bowing with newfound confidence. Her phone buzzed with a message from Chloe, now a top law student at Columbia, finalizing a partnership for the Phoenix Project. The roundhouse kick that had silenced a gymnasium had been an ending. But the ripples it created were a beginning. They were spreading outward, creating safe harbors, forging new weapons from art and empathy, and empowering a generation to refuse to be silent. The shy girl who was targeted for destruction had instead become a creator, building a better world from the ashes of her own. And that was the most powerful form of victory. Maya's story proves that one person's courage can ignite a revolution. In the comments below, share a moment where you witnessed someone stand up, in a big or small way, against injustice. Let's build a community where no one has to fight alone. Please, comment with respect. And if this story moved you, subscribe and share it. You never know who needs to hear that they have the strength to fight back.